Now, here's the other thing you can do though. Take a look. So if I bisect this side, it gives me the centers of the ellipse. Or it gives me, I'm sorry, the centers of the sides, which gives me 4 known points. These 4 points I know are on the ellipse and are on the square, both. Now, this next thing is a device I came up with to try and convince some students. A couple of years ago, we were talking about ellipses and they weren't kind of understanding how I was guessing as to the location of the minor axis. So I came up with this new way of explaining it to them. I want you to imagine you have a circle inscribed inside of a square. And actually, everyone look up for this or you're going to get lost. We'll take this in a second. So imagine if you have a circle inscribed into a square like this. Okay? You're going to find these 4 points. But then do you see that if I drew a straight line like this to each of these centers, do you see that it's going to be inside of the circle? It's never going to be out, the circle's never going to be inside of those lines. So like if I draw this diamond-like shape, I know that my curves for my ellipse have to pass outside of it. Does that make sense? So look, if I'm guessing, I can look right here and I can know that, okay, this is not on the side of the square, but it's pretty darn close to the side of the square. And I can look into my minor axis and basically say, well, my minor axis is going to be somewhere in here, the length of it. See those 2 areas? The length of the minor axis has to be somewhere in there. It can't be in here, and it can't be out here, so it's got to be in that little tiny area right there. Does that make sense? That's the number one thing that people will be confused by on the homework assignment. So try to make sure you understand this.
So you take the little areas that come from the VP.
Right, the minor axis. Now here's what I would tell you guys. Is this method exact? No. I will show you a mechanically exact method later. Okay, like next class. But when you're sketching, imagine an arc going from here to here, like this. Do you see that a pretty good guess is probably right about there? Does that make sense to you? If I swing, okay, eyes up everyone. If I swing an arc from here up to here, you see that that is a pretty good guess, the outer part right about there. And same thing in reverse here. If I go from here down to here and I swing an arc like this, it's going to hit probably right about there. Does that make sense? So what I'm doing when I sketch like this is I'm doing something like this. I'm envisioning the sweep of the ellipse and where it's going to cross that minor axis line. Now, is it a guess? Yes, but it's a very good guess. It's like saying, guess a number between 1 and 100, but I'll give you a hint. It's between 57 and 60. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a guess, but even if you're off by a little bit, you're not going to be off by much. Now, if you find these 2 points, and you take that distance and cut it in half, what you're going to find, if you did it accurately, is you'll find a point that's just a tiny bit closer to the viewer than the center of the square. It's going to be just in front of the square. I'm sorry, just in front of the center of the square. Does that make sense? And now this is a perfect bisection, so I'm taking this line, and I'm doing that to it. And that gives me this little yellow dot right here, which is the center of my ellipse.
Why would that make sense?
Because what do we know about the ellipses? What do we know about, what are the 5 absolutes?
So we have the minor axis always goes to the center of the square.
Right? And?
The major never does.
And why not?
Because of foreshortening?
Because they bisect each other.
Okay.
So that's the point. That's what I'm trying to show here is this bisection, when I bisect these 2 and I find this point that's just a little bit off of the center of the square, that's going to be the location of my major axis. You see what I mean? So now when I draw the major axis, I draw a perpendicular line right there, and that's my major axis. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Can you go back a couple steps?
Right, sure. Oh, and you guys, let me emphasize something. If ever I didn't mind going back a couple steps, it's today. Because today, this stuff is so important for you to get right that I actually think of today as probably the most important lecture I'm going to give all semester to you guys, just because it's the one that's the furthest from anything you'll see published. You won't find this published anywhere that I know of. I'll do some drawing at the end of this lecture, and you guys, actually, that's another thing. I am perfectly willing to blow our schedule out of the water if it means going a little bit slower today and making sure that you guys own this as much as possible by the end of the week. Yeah.
Sorry, I got really confused when you were saying, when you envision the arc, and then you have the yellow line, what was that estimation for?
Oh, what I'm estimating, and actually, I'll come back to you in just a second. What I'm estimating is this. Picture this ellipse or this circle. It has to be 10. Actually, you guys, listen to this carefully for a second. Realize that at each of these points, here, 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 and here, these midpoints, for one theoretical moment, the circle and the square are tangent. So the two lines are heading in the same direction for just an instant right here. Okay? But then when it gets up to here, those lines have rotated 90 degrees, but again, they're tangent for just an instant. So I have to envision an arc going from here, up through here to there. And so when I'm doing this line, what I'm envisioning is a circle going like this and arcing across that quadrant. Right. Yeah, it's got to be changed to this side, it's got to be changed to that point, to that point, to that point. But it's got to get there. And so to estimate the minor axis, I'm imagining that arc traveling up and seeing where it hits the minor axis there and there. And that gives me a good distance for the minor axis. And then I bisect them and I can find the center. Now, Dominica, what was your question?
I don't know, you just step forward, but that's what you said.
Okay, so you guys, again, just to go through, yeah, and
Do you arbitrarily pick where the major axis point is going to be, that yellow dot? And how it's gonna
not
be?
arbitrarily. I bisect the minor.
The minor is the little one.
The minor is the red line. So let me show you here. Come on. I do this to establish the length of the minor axis from there to there. And then I cut it in half and I find a point that's just a little bit in front. I bisect the minor axis to find the major.
So bisect means cutting it into
Cutting
two
it
equal
into
parts?
2 equal parts.
Okay, and that just happens to be a little bit
It's a
outside.
halfway point.
It will always be a little bit forward of the center. Like you guys notice, you see how this corner of the cube is closer to us than this corner? It'll always be a little bit closer to us than the center of the square. Yeah.
Alright, so you bisect the minor axis on those yellow X's.
I bisect the distance between these two yellow X's and I end up at that point right there. And so it looks kind of like that. Yeah.
The
yeah.
more the plane is foreshortened, the more the yellow dot is closer to us.
Basically, the more, actually it's the other way around. The more foreshortened this side is, the harder it's going to be to distinguish it from the center of the square, but it will always be a little bit off. Like if I were to find the center of this one, the major axis here would be like here, would be more obvious that it wasn't at the center. Okay. Anyway, so you guys, so now I find the major like that. Now, I do the same thing to estimate the major axis. Everybody take a look, eyes up. I know I'm going from those points, keep looking. Stop taking notes for a second, you guys. And I do the same kind of thing. I imagine this arc from there, and I imagine this arc from there. Now, I'm gonna tell you guys something that's a little bit weird, and I'll explain more later. I would encourage you to use this measurement, the one closer to the eye level, rather than this measurement. And there's a peculiar reason why. This one is harder to guess than the minor axis. And what happens is, if I go for, I know with this one, I can't go any farther out than right here, right? I can't be out here somewhere, because then I would be off the side of the cube. I know the arc has to stay inside of this quadrant. But down here, I'm more likely to go like this, and end up down here. Now remember, this line is bisected too, so if I end up down here and I bisect it, I'll end up here. And that can't be right. So what I do is I do this one, put this one a little farther out than it feels like I should, and then I bisect it, and I end up right about there, and then it all makes a little more sense. You guys, but just so you know, I can see the looks on some of the faces. We're spending the whole week on this, because it'll take a little time. You guys will go home, you'll try to do the cubes. Some of you will, about 30% of you will have success, and about 70% of you will come back with much better questions about exactly what you missed. And it will take a week for you guys to get it.
So again, with these major axes, how did you pick the yellow?
Well, I know that point is on the line, and then I envision an arc going from here to here and kind of sweeping across like this.
So that's like the guesstimation for that?
It is, again, it's a guesstimation, but it's a pretty good guesstimation.
Okay.
Because again, if I put this square in here, this diamond shape,
Yeah.
I know it has to stay outside of it. And so like if you envision a line going from here to here, it basically means I have to be in this area somewhere.
Okay.
You know, so it's a guess, but it's a very good guess. Yeah, okay.
This is a dumb question, but how did you get the first X's on the minor? So like those locations, I still
What I did was I started here,
So from the top of the cube?
yeah, and I started here and I swung an arc as if I was gonna go to here,
Oh, okay.
and I found where it crossed the minor axis, and again, that was a pretty good guess, because if you take a look at where the cube is, hang on, let me back up. I know I have to be somewhere in these two areas, like, so it has to be from here to here, and so that's a pretty good guess,
Oh, okay, that was
yeah.
So the major axis is a bit off of the center of the intersection.
Right.
of the plane.
Correct.
Okay, that's why I
Yeah,
asked.
so basically, if you take a look at this axis, you see that it's not passing through the center. And I also want to point something else out about the major axis. You guys, look at the major and minor axis. Eyes up, look at the major and minor axis, and look at the diagonals of the side here. I want to emphasize something. They have nothing to do with one another. If they ever appear to line up or appear to hit, it's purely coincidental. They have no relationship. Don't confuse them, yeah.
I don't understand how you got the first major axis with the red line in the front
You
of
mean
the.
the minor axis?
No, that one's going through this.
This is the minor.
Yeah, the other one,
This one?
the red one in front of the cube. Yeah, that
This
one.
This is the minor for the other side. This is the minor for this side.
Oh, okay. That's just a little confusing to me
Yeah.
because.
Okay.
That one that you just pointed to, is he going through the middle of the X on the other side?
He's going through the middle of this X.
Oh, that.
He would go through, yeah, he's going through this X right here.
Oh, so it's the front one, not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I showed, those axes are there to show you what the other side's minor axes look like, yeah.
So, if we were like to try to recreate this diagram in our notes, would you recommend like doing it on separate pages?
You could if you want. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad, you guys, here's the thing. This is really important. This is some of the most important stuff we'll do all semester. So if you're gonna give extra time in your notes, this is a good place to do it.
So the minor axis on the top face of the cube, is that one always parallel to the edges and sides of the?
Actually, you guys, Kevin just mentioned something, and I don't often explain it this way, but for some of you guys, this will help. And if it does, fabulous. If you don't understand what we're talking about, you can ignore it. Here's one way to think about the minor axis. If you ever want to know what the minor axis does, look at the next side. Look at the other side of the cube. So for instance, this minor axis is parallel to all the verticals. This minor axis is parallel to all of these lines. That was a great aha moment expression. This minor axis here, hey look, it's parallel to this line, and this line, and this line, and this line. Okay? It goes to the perpendicular vanishing point. That's exactly what you need to know. All right, now, so you guys, once I get to this point, what I have now is I have, actually everyone watch this next step. So I have these 4 points that I know I can trust, and I have the minor axis and the major axis. At this point, you can sketch in your ellipse, and it looks something like this. Do you see how that appears to be resting properly on the side of the cube? That's how you figure it out. I'm trying to go through all of these axes points, and I'm trying to make sure it bisects. I'm trying to make sure it stays symmetrical across the axes. Okay? Yeah.
Just one more question about
Yeah,
the major
sure.
axis. So after you find the middle for the major axis, and then you make sure that's perpendicular to the minor axis, and then you estimated the arc
Yeah.
to find the first bisection, and then you just
Doubled it.
Doubled it,
Yeah.
and then that would be the end of the arc.
Yeah, exactly.